stomach bug at their house. Everybody just about has had it pretty bad. Some of you have probably been hearing about it. Some news has been circulating around through the various text trees in the congregation, so you probably know more than I do about all that. But anyway, that just means that I'm filling in for Chris today, and Sam is going to preach and fill in for Chris today. And I asked him if it was all right if I just continued on in Daniel and just went on to Daniel 4. He said that was all right. I don't know if he knew what he was saying. He was in a little bit of a delirious state whenever I talked to him, but at any rate, he agreed. And so be careful what you sign when you're delirious. So we're in Daniel chapter 4, if you want to go over there. When I lived in Abilene, Texas, a long time ago, I remember I was sitting in on a lecture that was being given by a doctor of geriatric medicine, and he was talking about reading the Bible to people in nursing homes. And he said that the favorite book that people wanted to hear read from was, what do you think? The book of Daniel. People just like to hear the reading, and it is just very lyrical in a way whenever you read from it. It's filled with just dramatic, compelling stories, and they're exciting, and they're kind of familiar most of the time to people that are wanting to hear that, and it's written in a pleasing, repetitive way. Some phrases are just repeated over and over. Like, for instance, in chapter 3, we just looked at 3 last time. Chapter 3, verse 4 and following, listen to this. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "To you the command is given, O peoples, nations, and men of every language, that at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire." Now, that little list is just repeated over and over again. The horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe is hard to say, and all kinds of music. And it runs through that list over and over again. And folks in nursing homes, they'll be listening, and they'll just kind of get to horn, the pipe, the planet, the sand, and it's just kind of relaxing and fun for them to do that. So next time you're visiting in the nursing home, you might want to remember that. If you want to read, "Would you like for me to read to you from the book of Daniel?" And they'll say, "Why would I want that?" No, just kidding. You'll say, "Well, Mike said that was a good thing." Anyway. So chapters 4 and 5 are kind of companion chapters. Chapter 5 is about Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, his grandson, Belshazzar, and the handwriting on the wall. Remember that story? Belshazzar was a very arrogant young man, and he was prideful, and he had a big banquet, and all the rich and powerful people were there. And they were drinking wine and drinking wine and drinking more wine. And he called for the gold and silver goblets to be brought that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. And they were drinking out of those. And there was a handwriting on the wall that said, "Tekel, Tekel, Mene, Upharsin," which means, "You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting." And Babylon ended its domain that very night. They were overrun by the Medes and the Persians. And Belshazzar should have learned the lesson of chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar is trying to pass the lesson on to future generations to learn what he wished he had learned better. Chapter 4 is an open letter written by Nebuchadnezzar to warn future generations against pride. So let's read verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language that live in all the earth, may your peace abound. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs! How mighty are his wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. So this is from the most mighty and powerful man in the world. And this is what he's saying about the God of heaven, based upon what he learned from the experience he is about to recount. We're about to learn in this chapter what turned his mind to feel and to say these things about God. So this chapter is going to be the last that we hear of Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible. The last things that are revealed that he does or says. They call this his Magnificat. His Magnificat toward Jehovah God is his conclusions regarding this story. Beginning in verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. You find some clues here in the very first verse of his story as to what is going on in his life. He is at ease. He is flourishing. He's in his palace. He is rich and powerful. He has no problems. He's done it all. He's won it all. And that's the state that he is in. Verse 5, I saw a dream. It made me fearful in these fantasies as I lay on my bed, and the visions of my mind kept alarming me. So I gave orders to bring into my presence all the wise men of Babylon, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. So this sounds familiar, like what happened in chapter 2. Now he's had another dream. Then the magicians, the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in, and I related the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. But finally Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods, and I related the dream to him, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, since I know that a spirit of holy gods is in you, and no mystery baffles you, tell me the visions of my dream which I have seen, along with its interpretation. Now these were the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heaven dwelt in its branches, and all living creatures fed themselves from it. I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He shouted out and spoke as follows: Chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whom he wishes, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This is the dream which I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its interpretation, inasmuch as none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for a spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while as his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwell, and in whose branches the birds of the sky lodged. It is you, O king, for you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the end of the earth. And in that the king saw an angelic watcher, a holy one, descending from heaven and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place be with the beasts of the field, and you be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whomever he wishes. And in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. Therefore, O king, may my advice be pleasing to you. Break away now from your sins by doing righteousness, and from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperities. That's pretty good. Pretty good dream there. So I just want to pause for a second just to see what you're thinking. What is your assessment of King Nebuchadnezzar? And we're in chapter 4 now. We've read a great deal about it. And so, what kind of a guy do you think he was? Is that what you're going to answer, Rod?
Well, I was just going to say that I find it kind of interesting that he didn't call Daniel first.
Yeah.
He called these other guys first. I guess afraid of the interpretation. So he wanted to see if they'd give him a better interpretation.
Yeah, maybe.
He didn't call Daniel first.
Well, you're a wise man because commentators wonder that. They're like, well, where was Daniel? They call in all the wise men and he didn't come, and then he comes later. You may have the very answer. That may be why he did it. Davey?
I have a question kind of along the lines of that. So he calls the other people first before Daniel, and they tell him things. Is it, and I guess I've been confused on this for a while, is it that God opens Nebuchadnezzar's eyes to say, yes, Daniel's prophecy is correct? Or how does he know that what the people are telling him is incorrect?
How do you know that they related anything to him?
Well, even before that too. Remember whenever he called everybody and they couldn't, how did he know? Like, did God say, yes, this is the right one?
Well, in the first time, in chapter 2, he didn't tell them what the dream was. He said, you tell me the dream, and then you tell me what it means. And they're like, how can we tell you what it means if you don't tell us what it is? And he said, well, how can you tell me what it is if you don't know what the dream was? And they're like, huh? Tell us what it is. No, if you've got the ability to interpret it, you'll know what the dream was. But this time, he makes known the dream, I suppose, and it says that verse 7, it says, I related the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. I don't know whether they just went, I don't know. I would have taken a stab at it if I was them, knowing Nebuchadnezzar. He's kind of a ruthless guy, Ben.
Yeah, this kind of strikes at the heart of a issue that I hear all the time. Actually, who's running the show? Jesus was tempted by Satan and said, I have all these kingdoms, I can give it unto you. I kind of find with God here, he kind of, as he did in Job, he instructs his generals, which are the watchers, some hierarchy of the angels. They kind of decree it down. It hits finally to whoever has to go deliver the message kind of thing. It seems to me that there is some sort of hierarchy in that Satan has a lot of power in establishing kingdoms and control and apparently this angelic realm, whatever it is exactly. But God is ultimately in control. He can change it, put in. See, I have a problem with it. God installed Hitler. He's not complicit in sin, but he lets things happen to certain people that apparently probably deserve it. Anyhow, it looks a little more plain when I read, how the chain kind of filters out these orders. God's going to generals, going to the lieutenants, and then.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's how I kind of view it.
I think that Hitler I think Nebuchadnezzar makes Hitler look like a Girl Scout den mother compared to what he was like. You talking about a rich, powerful, ruthless, powerful over a huge domain of territory. From India and China all the way to the Mediterranean and all of Egypt. There are many, many countries in that space of land, and he had conquered all of them, and he had taken everything from them. He'd taken the best of the people. He just robbed their treasuries. He robbed their palaces, took all their gold, took their livestock, took people that he wanted and killed or left the rest. He was a pretty ruthless guy. And yet, in my younger days, I used to not really get the sense of Nebuchadnezzar. I used to kind of go, I think that maybe he was really a believer with a tender heart. Because, look in chapter 4, verse 3, look what he says. He's talking about the Most High God. He said, how great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Look what he thinks. Look what he thinks about God. Look in chapter 2. Go back to chapter 2. After Daniel not only tells him what his dream was, but tells the interpretation of the dream, and it all ends up favorable in a way for Nebuchadnezzar. It says in verse 46, Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and did homage to Daniel and gave orders to present to him an offering and fragrant incense. The king answered Daniel and said, surely your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, since you have been able to reveal this mystery. It's like, wow, your God is the greatest. Who else could do this? Who else could do what you just now did? Look in chapter 3, verse 28. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put his trust in him, violating the king's command and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. You see these moments in Nebuchadnezzar's life where he kind of goes, oh, man, your God is really something else. That's in verse 28. Look at verse 29. Therefore, I make a decree. Just to think that you can do that. I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. So your God is great, you guys are great, and if anybody says different, I'm going to tear them limb from limb and I'm going to burn their house down. And so you go, let's see, what is he like? Is he a good guy? Is he a believer with a tender heart? Is he still pretty much of a really ruthless, powerful guy that can just get away with whatever he wants? Look at chapter 3, verse 19. Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He was a man of great vengeance. Man, if you made him mad, if you got on his wrong side, he's going to tear you limb from limb. Was it Chris that was saying this, or did I read this, that they used to take trees, and bend them over and tie people's arms and legs to the 4 trees and then cut them loose? Didn't Chris tell us about that?
Yeah.
You remember that, didn't you?
Yeah.
I saw that in the Tarzan movie one time. I was a little kid. It was pretty cool. These guys were all tied. That's what I used to watch on Saturday morning. They didn't have anything, just had 3 channels, and they didn't have any shows to show, so they just showed old Tarzan movies. I used to watch those. Look at chapter 2, verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb. And your houses will be made a rubbish heap. He must have said that a lot. He just told everybody, I'm going to tear you limb from limb. In Jeremiah chapter 52, it tells what he did when he finally took Zedekiah, the king of Judah, prisoner. It says, the king of Babylon slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also slaughtered all the princes of Judah in Riblah. Then he blinded the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon and put him in prison until the day of his death. And he did that to nations everywhere. He was just going nation by nation and just doing the same thing and just leading people back as hostages. Captives were herded back to Babylon in a long line of captives with rings in their noses and a cord through the rings, and the cord just went all the way down the line. So you wanted to stay completely still in the line, because if you moved a little bit, you ever had anybody, hold on. That doesn't hurt too bad, but of course there's no ring in there, but that might hurt if you had it pulling like that. And so that was just the cruelty of this day and age. But what I want you to notice is that what we're looking at here is power. It is absolute power like we can't even imagine.
That's kind of what I was thinking of. I was thinking about what you said about Nebuchadnezzar. I find him very fickle. He has moments of acknowledgement of God and humbles himself, but he's always pulled and drawn back to his arrogance and his sinful life. And it's kind of a warning to us, the pride of life.
Pride. Yeah, that just happens to be the theme of the lesson today. I think you have hit it. You have a hand, Phil.
Yeah. However, if we look at the last verse you read, God shows himself as who he actually is. Daniel says, if you repent,
you turn from the way you've been living, this won't happen. And so that should give us the idea of how God actually looks at people in sin. If you turn to me, I'll forgive you.
Yeah, even a guy like Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah. And I think what God wants us to realize, especially through this story of Nebuchadnezzar, is just how great that God is. Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest, most powerful, the wealthiest guy in the whole world. He had everything. He lived in absolute luxury. He had accomplished things nobody else had. If you were to go to Babylon, you would see the most beautiful, ornate city, just gold encrusted everywhere. As a matter of fact, one of what later came to be known as the 7 wonders of the ancient world was in Babylon. What was it? The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And I've seen some artists' conceptions of what it looked like. It was just a tiered thing that just went up, and just gardens of every kind of tree and flower and plant, and everything was just in this thing, and it was just magnificent. And that's what he looked at when he came out on the terrace of his palace. He just saw all this stuff. He was the greatest, but he's not greater than God. And that's what God wanted him to know, Troy.
When we look at verse 4, Nebuchadnezzar was at home in my, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. My mind went to Luke 12, the rich fool. You know, I've got all this, I can build bigger barns that I can kick back and enjoy life.
Lots of eyes and my's.
Is there a warning in there for us?
Of course it is, and I think that's why this is here. I think that's why this story is in here. I don't know if that microphone got louder or my ears just popped or something. Got louder all of a sudden, didn't it? So let's see what happens. We'll go ahead and finish the chapter, and then we got some things to talk about in the last of our time. Verse 28. We're back in chapter 4, verse 28. All this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king. And that in other words, he had the dream, and Daniel came and told him what it meant. That's what happened. Verse 29. 12 months later. Okay. So maybe he thought about what was said. Maybe he kind of straightened up a little bit and started realizing maybe I should be better. I don't know. But it was 12 months later, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king reflected and said, "Is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself," and there's Troy's I and my again, "which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty? Look what I have. It's mine, mine, mine." While the word was in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven saying, "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes." Immediately the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled, and he was driven away from mankind and began eating grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. If that gets too loud for you, just reach in and tell those guys to turn it down. and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, but he does according to his will in the hosts of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, What hast thou done? At that time my reason returned to me, my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom, and my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true and his ways just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. So the vision he saw said that he was a great big tree, and he was cut down, but the stump was left, the roots were still there. He said that your reign will be restored to you, it will remain. And so it's like, well, how long was this 7 periods of time? I don't know. Some say, well, that was years. It was 7 years, maybe. Might have been 7 years. Might have been 7 months. Might have been 7 military campaigns. I mean, who knows? It was just the time that was allotted. When the time was allotted was over, then he kind of came to his senses. In the meantime, what was going on? How come somebody else didn't take over his throne? I was looking at Adam Clark's commentary, and he didn't hesitate on that one. He just said that Nebuchadnezzar's there it went. Anyway, Nebuchadnezzar's son took over in his place. He was regent in the place of his father while his father was ill. His son was named. Does anybody know what Nebuchadnezzar's son's name was? Not his grandson. That was Belshazzar. His son's name was, you might remember this, any of you that are going to have babies soon, they're looking for a name. His name was Evil Marduk. So, if you want to be sure that your kids are the most terrible in their terrible twos, just go ahead and name them Evil. Like Evil Knievel. This was Evil Marduk was his son. And so he reigned. He continued to reign while his father was ill. And this, some scholars said, well, there are diseases where people they just kind of lose sense of reality. Their mind just sort of snaps. And they're not really in touch with what's going on with humans, and they just kind of wander around like an animal or something. Just wander around outside and wander off. And nobody knows where they are for a long time. What are they doing out there? Well, they're just sitting around in the rain and getting rained on, and their hair is getting all matted up. Looks like feathers. They're all dirty, nasty. And, they don't trim their fingernails, so their fingernails get long. So he just kind of took a period of insanity. And Adam Clark said that his son was reigning in his place until one day he comes back and what's been going on? Well, I was away. And so he's restored back. So, what are you thinking about the conclusion of the chapter here? I've got some more stuff I want to talk about, but I'm just wondering, what are you thinking when you, as we read this and just kind of read the wrap up? Any thoughts come to mind? Because you might have better thoughts than what I had. All right, go ahead, Phil.
Sometimes we look at people and say, why can't you figure this out in their lives? We look at Nebuchadnezzar, why can't you figure this out? Because Daniel's already told you what's going to go bad, and you didn't respond to it. And so we look at people today and say, why can't you figure this out? And sometimes people have to go clear to the bottom before they turn around. And that's what happened to Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, yeah, even a guy like that, gotta go all the way to the bottom. Ben?
Don't you think that narcissistic psychopaths are drawn to power? I mean, I see it today. And God has to intervene and tell them actually who's in charge. But I lost my train of thought there.
My answer would be yes. Okay. To that part.
Yeah, it's just a common syndrome. I think it's, all power draws narcissistic people. That's just a fact, you know? And this guy was to the extreme. And various other positions will do the same thing. And God, but here's the problem too. He was a polytheistic. He never accepted God as supreme. Although he said that, but you notice he talks about his other gods.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good observation.
And so, I don't know, I don't expect to see him in heaven.
He gave some lip service to it, but you could tell that as soon as, I mean, just think what it took to get him to say those few things that he said. Extreme, miraculous things had to happen, and he saw it and went, whoa, your God is great, and you're great. But then he went pretty much right back. Rod?
I think it's interesting in verse 19 there, it says, Daniel told Belzec was greatly perplexed for a time, and thoughts terrified him. So then the king had to say, "Do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." So I think he was Daniel was kind of afraid to tell the king what the meaning.
Yeah, I think he
So the king
was.
told him not to be afraid, to go
Yeah.
give it to him straight.
Hate to have to tell you this, especially you, Narissa.
I think it's interesting that he was restored after the 7-year time frame. Like, it makes me wonder, like, why God let him have it all back and not deal with the natural consequences of it. That part is interesting to me, because not everybody gets that advantage to realize it and then be restored.
Yeah, yeah, I wondered that too. Of course, I think we all kind of wonder that, but God knows what's in people's hearts, and we don't. And if it had been told, if it said, and God observed that his mind had been changed, it doesn't say, it just says he was just restored. So I don't know why it was, but that is interesting. Okay, so and I want to kind of go to some application here. Some of the comments you were just making, you have to realize how far above our plane of existence these guys that he was living in. I don't know whether I should say this or not. I don't want to start anything, but it just was just on. It was on Amazon, and so it's like, hey, an Amazon original. So we watched this thing called Melania. We just watched it, and at first it's like, yeah, but then I started getting fascinated at the life that these people live. The Trumps. The life they live. And Donald Trump, by the way, is not Nebuchadnezzar. He may think he is, he may wish he was, I don't know, but he's not. And yet, even at that, the lap of luxury. I mean, a film crew was just following her around all the time. And when she just walked from room to room in her house, it's like, look at this place, and the clothes that she wore, and people just following her around going, can I do something for you? Need anything? Opened every door for her, dressed her, helped her get dressed, opens the door for her, drives her around, just lay down on the ground so she doesn't have to step on the sidewalk, I mean, it's just like, and they're not even Nebuchadnezzar. He was the most powerful, rich person in all the world and had accomplished all these things. So the level of pride that he would have, I don't know that we could match, but we can still learn. In Proverbs 27, verse 21, it says, the crucible is for silver and the furnace for gold, and a man is tested by the praise accorded him. A man is tested by the praise that people give to him. What if you're someone that everybody, and I mean everybody, just tells you how great you are 24/7? But then, that was in the New American Standard. In the New King James, it says, the refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, and a man is valued by what others say of him. Your value comes from what others say about you, or you are tested by the praise that is given to you. One of them seems to indicate that praise, luxury, wealth, power is a temptation. And the other one seems to indicate that these things measure the value of the person. What do you think? Which one do you think would be right? Forrest?
I tend to go with the idea of a test. Because, and this is something that really struck me in reading through the book of the Kings and Chronicles, that almost all of the kings of Judah, the ones that were even, that were considered good, they did good things, God blessed them, and then they got arrogant and turned away. And I think that idea of prosperity or praise being a test, that there's really something to it. And that I think is one of the hardest tests that can be put to a person.
I do too. I think it is one of the hardest temptations because we long for these things. We wish we had more power in our life. We had more control in our life. We wish we had more wealth in our life. We wish that people would recognize us more in our life. We wish for these things, and yet, when they come, they can be quite a temptation, more than we would imagine, right?
I was gonna say basically the same thing. One reputation you have is a measure of what you're doing. But when you start believing stuff yourself, and you're not thinking you're greater than other people, then you get in trouble.
Yeah. Was it Julius Caesar? Was he the one that had a guy that followed him around all the time, whispering in his ear something? Anybody remember what it was? Thou art but human, I think, or something like that. We've got a few minutes, and I'm just going to read some scriptures. That's it. Just going to read it. Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18. You say in your heart, my power and the strength of my hand made me this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who has given you power to make wealth, that He may confirm His covenant which He swore to your fathers as to this day. Proverbs 8:13. Pride and arrogance and the perverted mouth I hate, says the Lord. The word keeps coming up. Arrogance. Pride and arrogance. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Matthew 20, verse 25. Jesus called His apostles and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It's not this way among you. Whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life a ransom for many. Paul said, Romans 12, verse 3, through the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. Romans 12:16, be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. 1 Corinthians 3:18, let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish, so that he may become wise. 1 Corinthians 10:12, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. I got more, but do you see the point? Do you see how often the Bible teaches this lesson? Don't get arrogant. Don't start thinking it's you. Don't start thinking that you're so great. You know why this is especially important to us right now? To this congregation right now? Because we're doing well. Because we're prospering. Financially, we're prospering. Numbers of people, interest, in just about any way you can imagine, we are prospering, and we need to stay humble, realize that it is God who is at work in us, and not we ourselves. It's not any one of us, or even any little collection, some of us. It's God using everything that He has brought together here, and the praise and the glory needs to go to Him every day, always, and He will bless us. Okay, so look at this. We're supposed to get through at 10:20. You thought it was 10:15, but it's not. It's 10:20, and I'm done 2 minutes early. So let's go and get ourselves ready for worship.